Archie 636. It starts out with a page to spoil the premise of the issue, which will only make you bored and impatient for the story to get to that point, so it gets there. I read about the premise of this issue long before I got to read it, so I looked forward to it. Sabrina asks Salem if he'd like to go to Pop-Tates, and Salem says he could go for a milkshake. Something cartoons won't tell you about cats is that too much milk is bad for their stomachs, and shakes have more than just milk. So he can't be a normal cat biologically. He either has a human stomach that's just shrunken magically, or there's a spell to let him still eat and drink everything humans can, which seems weirdly merciful for the Witches' Council when he was turned into a cat as a punishment. That thing only seems to have him make less sense when it could easily just be explained as a magical cat. And then I'd never question why he still gets to have milk, or talk, or drink a milkshake. Also, he could just ask her to zap up a milkshake. But I guess the reason she doesn't is to save on magic, the entire appeal of money for witches. Sabrina tries to go inside, and the guy in front of her with black hair like Harvey doesn't hold open the door for her, so she slams into it. She thinks he's a jerk, but he showed no indication that he knew she was behind him, to be fair. If I were her, I never would have expected anything but this to happen. So she did this to herself by continuing to walk ahead just as fast, when she could have simply put down one of the bags and then held open the door. Or if she really wanted to make sure he'd hold open the door, she could have just asked him to. Also, I didn't even know this was Reggie, so the art sucked. Salem says a guy should hold the door open for a lady, and Lampshade said it sounds old-fashioned. Well, it's justified because he lived on Earth for centuries. Sabrina makes a good argument that you should hold the door open for anyone because it's common courtesy. Yeah, but she's too naive to get that not everyone values common courtesy. With some people, it's an alien concept they never consider. They're the types of people who refuse to send someone the stuff they ordered after sending the wrong items. Reggie would be like that, seeing no value to selfless action over logic. But again, they should both know that he didn't know she was behind him, so this writing has no self-awareness and thought put into it, causing me to go on for this long when it's only the first page. At first it looks like it's Sabrina who wants to prank Reggie, because his text bubble tail isn't directly connected to his head. Sabrina has the good sense to shush him, but instead of disagreeing with his revenge kick, she casts an eavesdropping spell on Reggie. Reggie only looks like Reggie in the next panel, because it can see his face. Veronica complains that boys have it easier because they don't have to worry about fashion or even looking good or showering most of the time. Archie gets offended because the last one was a jab at him, and Betty agrees with her, but Reggie just says this is boring and Jughead yawns. Which only makes sense instead of being forced because we're supposed to think Reggie's a bad guy and Jughead's a woman hater. Probably because he sees the trouble dating gives Archie, and he doesn't want to pay for someone else's food on a date. So I don't hold that against someone he's friends with Betty and Veronica just fine. They're being rude, but at least they're not saying Veronica's lying, so whatever. Reggie points out that girls choose to spend hours primping in front of the mirror. That's true. A girl like me can choose not to do that stuff with no consequences at all to how she'll be treated. So Veronica saying the words have to creates a false impression. I bet Archie would still date her if she didn't wear makeup, because if he didn't ditch her for bad behavior when he still got Betty, it has to be that he just loves her black hair. Reggie says girls don't realize how much they get away with using their ladylike charms. Some might and some might not. Veronica always got away with too much, like using the threat of dating Reggie and carrying it out to punish Archie. He says if he was a girl, he'd use that to his advantage. He only starts being wrong when he says that he'd never get caught pranking because no one would suspect a girl. He should know that someone would have caught him eventually, and then he'd get a reputation for pranking, so he'd always be suspected. I'm sure Alexandra from Josie got a reputation for mischief and gets suspected every time, so this line is forced. But I'm impressed that it took this long for the dialogue to go to crap in an argument like this. Veronica just states the obvious instead of refuting what he'd say like a normal person for some reason. Salem gets an idea to get back Reggie, and then Sabrina tells him not to. Okay, so then why on earth did she cast the eavesdropping spell if she wasn't always planning to get him punished with magic when she was around Salem? So she should have known he was planning on that from the second he made it obvious. I never thought I could imagine a proper excuse for this premise to happen, other than a typical evil witch casting the spell just because she hates mortals. But the excuse was even worse because Salem only does this to punish Reggie for an obvious accident. And rather than him trying to punish him for being sexist in the first place, he only got the idea for the specific punishment because of a conversation he just so happened to be having afterwards, which he only heard because Sabrina cast an eavesdropping spell for Salem too for no reason. She could have had the spell cast for only herself. If you want to have a spell cast like this, it'd be believable if it was cast to punish Jughead, because Jughead is the resident woman hater and did something accordingly. Wouldn't it have made more sense for Jughead be saying most of what Reggie did? And then Reggie would only say the getting away with pranks part. Salem waits until Sabrina's asleep, making me wonder why Sabrina didn't cast a spell to get rid of his powers for a bit, which he did Sam in some 80s comics, because there's no way she would have trusted him to not cast a spell. She has to have known that would only delay the inevitable, and he'd just write down his plan to be evil and cast the evil spell as soon as she'd give him magic back. Salem uses magic powder in a bowl and uses a flying broom to sprinkle it on the town. So at least that's trying to be more believable than it could have been, because it's not like a fugitive witch has this kind of power naturally. Still, he still has magic as that previous arc revealed, so this is meaningless. The only benefit is that it was smart of him to do this instead of expend his own magic. And while it'd make more immediate sense for a woman to cast the spell because of feminism, than for a guy to do this just because Reggie didn't hold open a door for someone he was oblivious to, it'd still be out of character for Sabrina to cast the spell on the whole town. Same goes for Enchantress since we don't know her for doing this. There's no believability in him casting the spell on anyone other than Reggie because his beef was only with him. You could have had a feminist witch cast the spell instead. But the writer didn't focus on believability and do that because it'd be misinterpreted as being against feminism. He could have done this to just Reggie and Jughead. He decides to watch the show eating popcorn with the crystal ball. As I hope the style of Sabrina as it be canon that the Witches' Council doesn't care about mortals and magic abuse. Because he'd have definitely been punished for this if they did. Archie wakes up and feels lighter. That makes no sense. If anything, she'd feel a little heavier. Then she's somehow surprised that the clothes in her closet are all she has to wear, and says she can't remember, even though there's no reason the spell would cause memory loss. I'm gonna have to remember to switch the pronouns until the spell is over, because at first it was easy to keep writing he and his from force of habit. Anyways, her line could have easily been worded, "I wish this wasn't all I had to wear." For no reason, just because Archie's father is a girl in the story, she's not fat. So that was an embarrassing mistake of the artist. And somehow, her memory is affected by a non-memory spell. So she asks Archie why she's wearing her old clothes. Because they're guys' clothes. Also, it's normal for women to wear t-shirts and pants, so I don't know why she even noticed anything wrong. How did Archie not wonder how these clothes got in her closet then? This shirt looks perfectly good, being purple even, so it's not believable that this problem emerged for Archie. It'd be better to show off this problem for Veronica, because Veronica would see nothing but girls' clothes in his closet and be disappointed, since a guy would be far more likely to reject girls' clothes, of course. Already the concept's being executed wrong and wasted by forcing memory loss to come with it. So I'm not really seeing what a gender-swapped Riverdale would be like. As usual, Reggie's vain and wonders what pranks to do today. Other than her wanting to only target Josie, that's Alexandra again. The spell just made Reggie more competent if she can use her good looks to pull the wool over someone's eyes. So if she ends up being right, this just did her a favor, the opposite of what the spell was meant to do. Reggie must have been ugly before, because he never had his good looks get him special privileges. So I just assumed it's because he's a guy and not because he's wrong that he's good looking. So if Reggie used to be ugly, then a gender-swapped version of him wouldn't be pretty enough that she'd think she could take advantage of the good looks. Salem has no reason to be judgmental that Reggie never learns when he pulled a way bigger prank on an entire town. So why would he care how Reggie is if he's nothing but evil? Betty thanks Veronica for picking him up in the car. A part of Salem's spell is making people think they were always the opposite gender, which makes sense to avoid the spell going too far by causing panic. All Veronica says is something seems different today. But how can he notice that if he thinks he was always the guy? Betty says he never felt stronger and is trying out for the football team today. So now the story is sexist when it has a female writer, so there's no excuse. When we all hoped the story wouldn't fall into this trap. We all know Betty's a strong sports expert already, so there's no reason to write it like she'd only feel stronger than ever because she's a guy now. Did the writer not know Betty was strong and good at sports? How? It's believable that Betty didn't try out for the girls' football team because even now most women would draw the line at football as too masculine, no matter how determined they were to prove themselves. It makes that one story where Mr. Lodge saw how much less sexist high school is a lot sillier. Because Veronica was a football player at the end, and everyone but him thought it was normal, so either she was out of character, or Betty is here because she'd have definitely joined football if even Ronnie would. A careful writer with talent probably could have written this story to have no sexist unfortunate implications, because nothing's forcing the story to have these problems so far. The way I'd imagine a gender-swapped Riverdale is that basically nothing would change about anyone's behavior in it, other than maybe the now girls trying harder to look good. Somehow Betty's able to feel like they're in a dream, and she somehow thinks that maybe they'll wake up and it'll be the weekend. Salem has to have made the spell like this on purpose, along with the memory manipulation thing, so it can be believable, except I have no idea why he did it like this, because this isn't making it entertaining, it's making it confusing, wrecking the point of the gender swap because it's not how it would have been like. Veronica stops the car and drives away without Betty because she somehow believes Betty's wild theory that's all a dream. So she wants to go do what's fun because it doesn't matter if she's late for school if it's a dream. So completely forced idiot ball conflict that has nothing to do with gender. Betty says she was only joking about being in a dream. It was out of character for her to do that. Veronica wants to win Archie's heart once and for all. Since when did she consider Betty to be competition to that extent that she has actively tried to win Archie over? Archie's always considered Veronica to be his main girl, while it's Betty who's trying to win his heart over when he's clearly not in love with her. But suddenly, just because Veronica's a guy, the rule changed, and Archie's preferring nice blondes, as if the writer somehow thinks women have different tastes in partners than men inherently. They got a female writer to avoid screwing this up for nothing. How did this writer never hear about the girls like bad boys cliche? Of course Veronica already won Archie over, or he would have completely stopped giving her a chance long ago. Anyone would have known to have Betty be doing this instead. If you want to have this make sense, you need to establish that Archie stopped giving Veronica a chance in this world because people are a lot more mad at guys who cheat on their girlfriends. And so Veronica dating someone else was immediately the last straw for Archie. Well, it's forgiven normally because double standard abuse female on male. But it's not explained that Archie gave up on Veronica in this universe because she dated Reggie. So this is just confusing. I mean, Archie's personality you'd think would still be completely the same, so he'd still be just as lenient to Veronica. Archie somehow thinks that he didn't remember his shoes being uncomfortable and hard to walk in, as she's wearing high heels. Why would Archie think his previous shoes were heels if clearly she must have needed to borrow them from someone else? Because she had nothing but guys' clothes in the closet. Of course she doesn't remember her shoes being uncomfortable, they can't have been heels. She somehow knows that something's different about today. I don't see why the writer thought making the story confusing the entire time would be something you could make up for. This should have been a peek into an alternate universe that was always gender swapped, so you wouldn't have these confusing lines. Jughead wonders if they both feel weird because of something they ate. Somehow. Just because Jughead's always been a girl, the dog isn't named after hot dogs literally, and she chose a different breed of dog. So that's more sexism. The first part of the name means high in French, but the only reason I could think of for it being chosen is that French is associated with fashion in America, and Jughead wouldn't care about fashion, especially not more than hot dogs, just because she was born a girl. The whole reason he doesn't care about how he looks is that he knows he's ugly. Also, there's a missed opportunity here, because we don't see what happens to Jughead's woman-hater quality as a girl. We don't know if that's an inherent part of Jughead's personality, or if an inherent part of Jughead's personality is to hate the opposite gender. Salem makes the writer look arrogant by saying this is some quality entertainment, even though aside from Archie naturally hating high heels, all that's happened so far is confusing nonsense that has nothing to do with being gender swapped. Well, it's nice to see the character designs, it's boring other than that. Speaking of boring, the story wastes time with Sabrina finding out what Salem did, or at least dragging on too long about it, if she has to find out to resolve the story. At this point, it's lucky they didn't cast a spell on her too. He thought it'd be more fun to cast a spell on everyone. Why literally everyone instead of just Sabrina's close friends? It'd be impossible for him to spy on everyone, so he'd only spy on them anyways, so why waste the magic powder? Sabrina has her hands on her head, looking like even more of an incompetent idiot, because she thinks it'll take her ages to figure out how to get everything back to normal. I'm just wondering why she can't remember how it used to be in point. I have to just assume that the magic powder's effects would still be constantly keeping the spell going because it hasn't worn off. So that point would be prevented from working by it. This was something I had to assume in a little Sabrina story too, but it's just continuing the 2010s trend where the writers are too lazy to establish the rules. So the story looks stupid at first glance. I'm just wishing this scene didn't happen, because this adds nothing good. She decides that watching for a few minutes couldn't hurt. I don't blame her, but she doesn't really hate what he did then. She's not that much better than Salem. Veronica looking too much like Reggie in her guy form is just confusing, because I'm thinking of this person as Reggie. Veronica hands Archie some flowers, at least that's a believable difference because of gender. But again, why do you think you need to give gifts at all? It's not like Veronica is saying, I'm sorry I ever dated Reggie on you. I promise to never do it again. He tells Archie to be his and says he won't take no for an answer. I'm just too confused that Veronica would ever be in the situation where Archie isn't already his to enjoy this. You know, Archie could call Veronica a creep because a guy saying, be mine, would come off a lot more creepy than a girl saying that. So based on the double standard, it could be made to make sense that Archie doesn't like Veronica as much with the gender swapped. Archie thanks Veronica. At least some of the gifts are presents in a bag that would probably actually be good gifts. I like that even as a guy, Veronica says they must do something about Archie's clothes, and plans to treat her to a shopping spree. So that isn't considered gender exclusive, so why is other stuff? And wouldn't Veronica have always wanted Archie to have better clothes? So why didn't he instead ask where the clothes he bought for Archie went, if he only has memories of a gender-swapped reality? And why doesn't Archie wonder where those clothes went? And why is Archie just saying as if she's confused by this somehow? Also, this brings up a good point. Why didn't female Veronica buy Archie a bunch of fancy new clothes? Then after most of the page is wasted by Betty doing a touchdown, wasting the idea of her being a guy, the female Moose wishes she could play and says that no girls are allowed on the team, because apparently there's no female football team in the school. Weird, because that was definitely a thing in some earlier story in the franchise. Oh, but it's not the in thing anymore to care anymore, because things got better. So it's gone now. The writer thinks most schools wouldn't have a female football team. I don't remember my school having one, but I never paid any attention to sports. Jughead has her hand on Moose's shoulder, reassuring her that she should just form her own girls' team. And I guess it's not like Jughead is a man-hater because she's not complaining about men being sexist by not having a female football team. Why does a female Moose want to be called a name as demeaning as Mouse, when a mere gender swap wouldn't explain that? And why does she get drawn to have Betty's hairstyle? It makes sense for her to have Veronica's hairstyle because in terms of jealousy and physical abuse, Veronica's pretty similar to Moose. The only difference is she mistreats the one she's dating because of jealousy. Veronica decides to try to outdo Betty because Archie likes sporty people. It's lampshaded that Veronica's being an idiot, risking getting hurt when he goes out in the field in a football game. Betty gets slapstick, Veronica acts happy, and then gets booed off the field. There's a cringeworthy line just to reference a meme that makes fun of the meme by having Veronica say it at a time like this, instead of feeling hurt. Veronica's asked if he lost his mind for doing this. If the writer knows she's writing a character badly, there's no excuse then. Veronica won't risk hurting herself doing something like this just to impress Archie, because Archie would be wrapped around his finger even with the gender swapped, if Archie's always going to be indecisive and easily distracted by the sexy. And obviously nothing about being a guy should rob her of her IQ points. Then Mr. Grundy warns people to stay outside and stay put because there's fireworks in the cafeteria, so of course people will go to see it. Grundy should have just told them to stay outside, and that'd be obeyed because he's the teacher. And there's no way the students would go inside the cafeteria when something so dangerous is happening. Also, I've read a lot of Archie stories, but I don't remember Reggie's pranks being outright dangerous and to that degree, and targeting people other than Archie and Jughead, and even Moose. Of course Reggie gets in trouble because she was seen around before it happened. The artist barely tried to make Miss Beasley look different. I didn't even notice at first. For once the story does care about logic when it involves Reggie getting in trouble, but this doesn't do quite enough to prove the writer's point. Reggie didn't even get a chance to have a situation where girlish charms could get people convinced of her innocence, because someone already saw her around before the prank happened. And of course she already had a bad reputation, so of course she failed. But for all we know, she would have had this lie work in a different town if she wasn't seen before the prank. So this won't convince the audience that Reggie was wrong in the first place. Sabrina wouldn't have taken this long to say the spell went too far. She'd have thought that as soon as Veronica ran out on the football field to impress Archie, which might have been justified if Archie said she's turning down the gifts because Veronica keeps dating Reggie. As possessive as she is of Archie, I just don't buy that she'd do this when she could always date Reggie. Why try to impress him when she could just threaten to date Reggie again and keep him on his toes? That always worked. Sabrina complains that Reggie thought a girl would get away with it and tries to blame Salem, but there's no outright proof that Reggie wouldn't have set off those fireworks as a guy. We only have one example to go off of, so it's not really a fair argument yet. Salem says Reggie got karma, and at least Sabrina agrees, but then plans to fire up the cauldron. Why would you even waste time saying magic cauldron? Sabrina doesn't know exactly how to reverse the spell. She has no reason to think that part of the spell could wear off and make everyone realize what happened. Why would it ever wear off partially instead of all the way? And she has no reason to think that everyone would figure out Salem did it, unless it turns out that her friends know about Salem having powers too, when they didn't even know he could talk in an earlier arc. Sabrina keeps looking unacceptably dumb for a protagonist. She thinks she needs to get everyone in one place to all fall within range of a reversal spell. But that wasn't the case with Salem, and he still cast a spell on everyone. So can't she just do what Salem did, but with antidote powder? Won't there just be an all-purposes dispel powder, if the spell is apparently a spell? Well, at least there's enough to do with this gender swap idea that it was justified having most of the pages. Salem at least tries to help by saying that a free event could attract everyone to one place. I guess Sabrina thinks she doesn't have enough magic to cast a spell on everybody to simply brainwash them to go into one place. I remember little Sabrina's story where she had posters be enchanted so that anyone looking at them would vote for her. Betty says it's a good thing no one was hurt. Reggie's at least proud that no one was hurt, and somehow expects her plan to impress Veronica. I'm not sure it was ever in his character to think a prank would impress Veronica, and even if it was, a dangerous prank, definitely not. Veronica doesn't want to let Betty sit at the table when she was going to sit there, implying that their friendship is even worse for no reason just because of a gender swap. And Archie tells them to calm down and agrees to sit in the middle. Dilton asks to sit with them, and for no reason Reggie tries to tell her they're full. I don't remember Reggie having so little respect for Dilton that he told him not to sit with them at lunch. But at the same time, I don't remember Dilton ever trying to sit with them at lunch. I just realized, what if that's supposed to be making sense because of the gender swap too? I didn't think that at first because the Archie characters were already gone so wrong, being idiot parodies of themselves. So I just figured they're getting the characters wrong in the 2010s in general. At least the female Reggie design tries to not have the same hairstyle as Veronica's, but it's still long enough to remind me of her too much when I'm trying to call her by her right name. Dilton says that there's a Josie concert, and it's been posted on Facebook. And Dilton doesn't question at all that Josie's band wants everyone in Riverdale to attend their concert. They'd want that because bands want to make as much money as possible, but you'd think someone would immediately make fun of this completely unrealistic expectation. Imagine everyone in town having the same music taste so that they all go to a concert at once. Sabrina flies on a broomstick and goes over the concert goers. Salem rightly points out that he just did Sabrina a favor because she's strengthening her magical abilities, because she has to learn to think on the fly to fix this. So it's a good thing he's written to say this to justify his position in her life. But why would I think the kids would learn a little appreciation if they're not going to remember being the opposite gender? They'd only learn that if that was an extra part of the spell that changed them back. Salem is somehow surprised that Sabrina got Josie to perform a free concert, which she did in the 90s comic. Because the idea that she can brainwash people as always is outside the realm of possibility to him, because of a little respect Sabrina gets by the modern writers. There's no reason to waste comic space on the concert starting. She wouldn't wait to undo the spell. She flies over them and pours the antidote powder. And it cuts back to everyone back to normal, when I was told earlier that she didn't exactly know how to undo the spell. I wish she wasn't written to be unsure of herself then if it led to nothing. Archie thinks that Josie's music video was just a parody because it showed everyone in the concert as the opposite gender. So this makes a good effort of explaining away why nobody will freak out over the inevitable video evidence of the gender swap spell. Everyone just assumes the video is faked by CGI. Okay, but the makers of the videos would still know that witchcraft exists because they didn't remember baking anything, and would know they can't do that. This one example works to explain it away though. Why does Betty feel like they were all at the concert if they don't remember being there? Magic would be able to overpower the brain's natural inclination to keep finding familiar stuff familiar, because it could put their brains back in time, and it would have done that. The Archie gang says they're happy the way they are. I didn't get a satisfying conclusion to the argument they had at the start of the story that took advantage of them learning from this experience, as I don't know for sure if Reggie was wrong. I feel cheated at the end of the story, like it ended a bit too fast. The story ends with Sabrina thanking Salem for saying nice work and telling him that he of all people should know how it is to be stuck in the wrong body, so he just wanted people to sort of know how he felt. But failed because the spell had them not realize it. So this line just makes it even more forced that he cast the spell. This issue, unfortunately by Tanya Del Rio, is about Salem casting a gender swap spell on Riverdale. But somehow he confuses us by also having memory loss be a part of it. And changing the rules so that Veronica feels like she has to try to win Archie over, when obviously she would still have him wrapped around her fingers regardless of the gender, because gender couldn't possibly determine taste in partners. It could have been justified if Archie said that Veronica saying, "be mine," and dating Reggie on her makes him come off like a creep as a guy. Salem only cast the spell because Reggie didn't hold open a door for Sabrina. But he didn't even know she was behind him. So as I expected, the spell even being cast was forced. Of course it was interesting to see gender-swapped Archie characters, so I was appreciating the designs the whole time. I could understand why that would be considered popular, if it is. But that doesn't make the story fantastic just because of something as superficial as looks alone. Because the issue was by someone incompetent enough to have it be sexist, a trap that this premise was very vulnerable to, and it could have easily not fallen into it. Why is the sporty tomboy Betty a football star only because she's a guy? Her entire role in the story was wasted. Betty should have been the one trying to impress Archie, because that's always been her character, and she's a sports girl, while Veronica would never try a touchdown. But this writer thinks being a guy inherently means that this makes sense because of biology. Veronica and Betty never say they're encouraged to try football by people before this. which would have justified this better so it wouldn't be trying to be just a biology thing. And even then, who would be so stupid as to risk getting hurt going out on football fields during a game? Have a moose do this then. Come to think of it, we didn't see Midge. She could have done this to impress Midge. Another bit of sexism that actually doesn't harm the story, well aside from Archie's father not being fat, is Jughead having a different name and breed of dog for no reason, but that's minor by comparison. The name change makes no sense because he obviously called the dog Hot Dog because he likes hot dogs. It doesn't like food any less as a girl, but I guess it's believable that a girl would feel compelled by society to get a girlier looking dog if she had the option. Really, the only thing that was done right with the gender swap story is that Archie hates wearing heels and feels less comfortable in guys' clothes. But Archie only wears heels because somehow his mother thought it was weird that she was wearing the clothes in her closet and offered her clothes. No one should have noticed that this feels like a dream. This is just a Genesis Wave problem all over again. For the most part, the issue wasted the concept on confusing us and having conflicts that should have had nothing to do with the gender swap. Reggie even trying an extremely dangerous stunt in the cafeteria is too evil even for her just because she's a girl. Also, when I looked forward to seeing this issue, I never imagined that Salem would look as horrible as he does. I don't know why they won't have him look like sitcom Salem, or animated series Salem, or even the 70s style Salem looked better than this.